Jody Wilson-Raybould set off a story that sent shockwaves across Canada, pulling back the curtain on a tangled web of business and politics. Earlier in 2019, Wilson-Raybould was removed from her post as Justice Minister and Attorney General. Soon after, there were reports the Prime Minister's staff attempted to press her to intervene in the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin, and that exasperation with her lack of cooperation was one reason for shuffling her out of the justice portfolio. Wilson-Raybould then resigned from cabinet, and in late February, she testified at a government hearing where she detailed the pressure to give SNC a deferred prosecution agreement. The SNC scandal finally came to a head earlier this week, when a division on SNC pled guilty to fraud and agreed to pay a $280 million fine relating to its work in Libya. Jody Wilson-Raybould has been named BNN Bloomberg's Newsmaker of the Year, and she joins me now from Vancouver. Wonderful to be with you and to be able to catch up with you and get your thoughts on this. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And let me ask you, with the SNC court ruling this year, do you feel justified?
Well, I wouldn't say I put it in terms of feeling justified. I am somewhat glad that this has come to the place where it is and a guilty plea was entered. I feel that the justice system was able to do its job and take its course, which resulted in the guilty plea and the decision of the prosecutor and defense counsel coming to an agreement. So for me, having gone through 2019 and being in the headlines, I appreciate that the justice system unfolded, that it did independently, and that there was no political interference, and that brought us to this place.
It did. Do you think, though, that that Canadians should be a little bit concerned about what we learned during this process, that perhaps the government picks winners and losers as it relates to companies to support or not support?
Well, I think that what this year has showed, that we need to be constantly vigilant about the nature of the democracy that we live in, ensure that we continue to protect the institutions that we have, which is what I was doing as the Attorney General, and to ensure that we uphold the rule of law and the independence. And I think Canadians have been brought into an important conversation about what all of those things mean. We need to be constantly vigilant about it, but I believe that the justice system, as I said, took its course, and Canadians can be confident in our justice system, and that the Director of Public Prosecutions did what she deemed appropriate in this case.
I interviewed Stephen Jaroslawski just yesterday on BNN Bloomberg, and he seemed to have some concerns that some of the people involved needed to still be accountable, that there were perhaps people who were involved in the crimes and that they needed to be accountable as well. Do you think that we have done that?
Well, I mean, it's a hard question to answer. I mean, with any prosecution, there are various facts, situations, and evidence that comes before any prosecutor that they have to weigh in terms of the likelihood of a conviction. There were, of course, things to consider in this particular case, not knowing all of the details of the evidence that was before the prosecutor, or the discussions that were had between defense and the prosecution. It's hard to say. I mean, this was the agreement that they came to, weighing all of the evidence and the facts that were before them. So we have to understand that this is the nature of all prosecutions, and that there is discretion of prosecutors to use tools, in this case, a deferred prosecution agreement, or to go into a plea situation, or to go to trial. And the choice of the prosecutor in this case was to have a plea situation.
I wonder, though, if the punishment will dissuade perhaps others and other companies from entering into the same type of business.
Well, I mean, I think there's separate conversations that need to be had. The conversation, from my perspective, that was had over the course of 2019 was, with respect to this company, was around not the company specifically or the merits, the pros and cons of a deferred prosecution or remediation agreement, or foreign corruption discussions that are ongoing on an international stage. Those are important discussions to have, but separating those out from the discussion with respect to the last year, we were talking about the independence of the prosecution, the independence of the justice system. In this case, this was the result. The discussions around the merits of deferred prosecution agreements, deterrence, those are discussions that politicians and many other people can continue to have. I think they're important discussions.
But it sounds as though most important bottom line to you is that the justice system, the rule of law, was able to work.
I mean, I think that's fundamental to this discussion. Well, I appreciate the newsmaker comments that you made off the top. In terms of 2019, the lessons that I take away from that is ensuring that we protect our institutions, ensuring the rule of law is upheld, and independence. I think it was an important conversation that we had as a country. Certainly for me personally, it was a bit tumultuous in terms of the roller coaster that presented itself. But we can be, I believe, confident in that we live in a country under the rule of law and that we have an independent judicial system.
So I think I know your answer, but was it worth it personally?
Well, it was worth it personally, and I, reflecting back, as you probably can appreciate, I've done that quite a lot.
Yeah.
I don't regret anything that I did. I would do the same thing. I was doing my job as the Attorney General, and I would do it again if presented the same situation. What I do regret is that we had to get to this place. Had we just enabled, or others just enabled the prosecution in this case and the justice system to unfold as it should, we wouldn't be in the situation that we are now, and maybe discussions or advances around climate change might have been, and actions taken might have been the newsmaker of the year.
Understood. Do you think that the Liberal Party has changed or learned something from this?
Well, I can't answer that question. You'd have to ask people within the Liberal Party. I'm hopeful that, and I heard some comments from the Prime Minister around the guilty plea. I am hopeful that he and others are reflective of what happened over the last year, and understanding that this could have all been avoided had we ensured that there was no political interference, pressure, or otherwise in terms of this particular case and moving forward. Of course, the company will continue on in its business and its work, and I hope that lessons learned from this for the Liberal Party, the government, and for Canadians is the vigilance that we must ensure continues to exist around our institutions.
Which is exactly what you stood up for, and I think people appreciate that. I am curious, though, when it was going on, what did you make of the Prime Minister's comments about saying that he will always stick up for and stand up to protect good quality jobs? You were standing up for the justice system.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before. I mean, of course, jobs are important for all Canadians. We want to ensure that we can create the space for all Canadians to have good, well-paying jobs. We all want that. That's beyond dispute. What I believe is that if we do not have or live in a country under the rule of law and have clarity and understanding as to the rules and the independence of our institutions, then that doesn't create a climate for investment and the creation of jobs. So we need to ensure that we understand the distinction in my mind. Certainty around a rules-based order creates certainty for investment in my perspective, which in turn creates jobs. So I think bottom line for me is the understanding of the institutions and the very fundamental nature of the democracy that we live in, and maintaining that is important if we are going to succeed both economically and socially as a country.
And to your point, as a country, as an independent MP from out west, what is it feeling like out there with respect to their view of the federal government?
Well, I mean, there's a diversity of opinions. Certainly that was reflected in the election that we had, which from many accounts was quite a divisive election. We have major issues that we're confronted with out here in British Columbia. Climate change being first and foremost the issue that I heard through the election. We have discussions around major resource development projects. A lot what I hear is wanting to ensure that we, as you said from the beginning, remove the veil somewhat of how politics is done in Ottawa and ensuring that our representatives that we send to Ottawa are representing our issues or the issues of constituents directly, as opposed to having leaders in Ottawa reflect what they want back to constituents. So for me, the election that I went through, or the campaign that we went through as a team here in Vancouver Granville, was very different from what I was able to see across the country in terms of what other people were experiencing. It was a very positive experience for me and for our team. We engaged with hundreds of thousands of people, not only in Vancouver, but across the country, that want to actually find ways to do politics differently. It's an overused phrase, but it's something that I continue to hear every day when I'm on a plane or when I'm walking down the street, is people want to see integrity in their politicians. People want to know and have confidence that they will do the right thing, and that they will, most importantly, in doing that, represent the issues that are of concern to them. And I'm proud to have been reelected as an independent member of Parliament. We need to work across party lines to solve some of these major issues. And I'm going to continue, even if I'm sitting in the very back corner of the House of Commons. It's an important seat, and I'm going to continue to use my voice on the important issues of our time.
Very well said. Jody, thank you so much for your time again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Catherine. Nice to chat with you.
You too. That is Jody Wilson-Raybould, independent member of Parliament for the British Columbia riding of Vancouver Granville and BNN Bloomberg's Newsmaker of the Year.